Hello everyone and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm Ian Croll, joined by Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland. It is Friday morning and we're here to talk all things Everton. First off, Joe, a couple of days off, feel refreshed, how are things? You've not been off, have you?
I've had a few days off, yeah. I've given up trying to book time and hope it's quiet when I'm off, and now just accept that it's busy every day. So, yeah, managed to kind of enjoy watching things from afar for a little bit.
Have you managed to keep yourself away from it?
Not really, no.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gav, how are you?
Every day's a day off for me.
Okay, fair enough.
My employers may say different. Same. There's never a day off, is it, with Everton at the moment?
No.
And that will probably be the case once the playing season has ended, dare I say. And busy. It's changed a lot since what was in here on Monday, was it? Tuesday?
Wednesday, wasn't it?
Oh, was it a Wednesday? Yeah, so in 48 hours it's changed since we were speaking on Wednesday.
Yeah, it has, to be honest. It's we'll timestamp this now because, like you said, everything is fast paced, changing by the minute. To be honest, so what are we? 11:40 a.m. Friday, the 10th of May. So, if you are listening on Apple Pods, if you're listening on Spotify, we might be out of date by the time this rolls
by
down.
11:50.
Yeah, you never know. So I know Joe's got his phone there. He's going to keep an eye on proceedings on Twitter and stuff like that as we're there. So we might have some breaking news. But like I say, we will see. We are live, so give us a subscribe, show us some support, and give us a share. All the support that you give us is absolutely appreciated. Also, give us a review on Spotify and Apple Pods as well. Also, leave us a comment. Leave your opinion. As always, Joe and Gav, I'm sure they'll respond back to anything you guys say. So we are going to talk about Sheffield United, the last home game of the season, but predominantly we will speak about the takeover. I know we say Joe's been off this week, so we'd love to hear his thoughts on proceedings, everything else that goes along with that. A few little tidbits. I know Gav wants to vent about something in regards to the young player of the year.
Absolutely.
So we will
give me 15 minutes.
Yeah, we are going to come on to that. Slight update maybe on Sheamus Coleman's future at the club. It reports he's been offered a new contract, so we'll hopefully get the lowdown on that. But Joe, it's all takeover. Good, bad, ugly, I suppose, if that's what you want to call it. First day back in work, but what is your understanding at this moment in time of the state of play, I suppose, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, I think things aren't quite moving as quickly as people would hope or want them to. I think we're still in a little bit of a daze, really, from the last fortnight of ongoing shenanigans with 777 partners. But I think what's become clear over the past 10 days or so is that there have been a lot of red flags for a long time. And, I'd like to hope that listeners will agree that we haven't been shy in pointing them out. But it feels like that move is probably coming towards an end right now, for a combination of reasons, really. I think it's the first pod I've done since on Monday when I wrote about the Leadenhall Capital, the London-based lenders, lawsuit filed against them in New York. $600 million fraud claims. Now, they're serious allegations, but I think that people have to remember that, one, this is a civil lawsuit, not a criminal one. Two, they're only allegations at this stage. We're right at the very preliminary stages of proceedings. 777 haven't commented on them, so we haven't heard their side of the story either. But obviously they are very serious claims, and they come up against a backdrop of wider issues. And I think really, rather than them claims be necessarily anything that comes as that much of a surprise, they perhaps almost, the allegations arguably fill in some of the blanks that we have wondered about 777 and how they're operating and their wider business interests. They say it's one of 16 lawsuits that the company is facing, which is obviously a problem. And I think it's not that is the straw that breaks the camel's back necessarily. It's more that you set those claims against the realities of what we know, and the realities have become clear with 777 in recent weeks. You look at their Australian airline bonds are entering voluntary administration, leaving passengers stranded across Australia. That's not a good look. Why did that happen? It happened because of something that we've reported on for a while at The Echo, which is one of 777's biggest backers, ACAP, starting to look to divest from them. If that relationship breaks down, they're one of the main sources for 777's funding. So if they need money to complete the Everton deal, which we know that they do, where else are they going to get that from? So you look at what happened in Australia with Bonza. You look at the fact that they needed an extension to try and meet the Premier League condition for the takeover of buying out MSP. Obviously, they sought an extension over that, which meant they couldn't get the money straight away. You look at the fact that just in general, it's taken since September, and there's still been no answer on that. You look at what we reported on here as well about things like their PR company moving away from them over allegations of in relation to payments. You look at Standard Liège, another club that that they own, reported throughout this year about them paying players late and staff late and things like that. Obviously, there are further issues there. And all of this kind of combines to create a really unhappy picture around the group. One that is, has been building, and I think it's perhaps now built to the point where, it looks really, really unlikely that the Premier League would give them approval. It looks really, really unlikely that they'd even get to the position where they'd ask that question of the Premier League now, because they need to find £160 million to pay MSP, and it doesn't look like they could do that. And really, we're probably at a point where Farhad Moshiri, who has been dead set on 777 for so long, and has believed that they have been the only ones, they've been the right partners for him. Well, I think now at this point he's probably got to start looking elsewhere. So now we're probably at this present moment in time almost seeing reality catch up with expectation. I think a lot of us have thought this might happen at some point. I think there was a fear that this stuff might happen after they'd been granted the approval, and that this stuff would perhaps catch up with 777 once they were already in control of Everton, which would obviously be real concern. That looks like it might not happen now, and it means that Moshiri has to look elsewhere, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. Moshiri is probably evaluating his options. We know this is a process that already started last month when he tasked Deloitte with looking for alternative funding packages to either maybe rival 777 or help get them over the line. So we know at least internally behind the scenes there, at the very top, there's perhaps been a kind of starting to move towards contingency planning and plan B. Well, now I think they're likely to be in full flow now, because I think to carry on working on the basis that the 777 deal is viable and will ultimately lead to success would be, naive at best and probably incompetent at worst.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Joe. Really good update. Gav, obviously we spoke about this on Wednesday, so for me and you, this is kind of a bit of a part two. And, Jordan, that podcast, that Alan Myers tweeted that Moshiri's looking for a resolution by Saturday. It's Friday now. But we're not going to get a resolution, are we, by Saturday? The only update I suppose we could get is that 777 had dropped completely from the picture, because we know now, as Joe's said there, reports circulating around as well that it's not viable for them to take over the club. So a resolution in terms of 777 only, but it's going to continue to roll on either way.
Yeah, I was thinking about this after we spoke on Wednesday, because obviously it broke, didn't it, just as we literally starting to talk. And it's whether there's other conversations going elsewhere that we're not aware of, isn't it? That actually, maybe what the communication will be is, speculation. Obviously, 777 that is being dropped, but something else, But I'm just saying for MSP are going to increase their involvement, because obviously they've got this thing, haven't they, of the over the loan, haven't they, where you can acquire 50.1% of the shares, isn't it?
I think it's 50% plus a share.
Plus a share, yeah. And whether you want to do that is a moot point. But that could be something, something around MSP expanding their role or whatever. That, so a bit of bad news or good news, whichever way you want to look at it, at the same time. Whether that happens today, I'm not so sure. But there could be there is other conversations. We know that going on, and that could be the SOP, couldn't it? Really, but we'll just have to wait and see. But Joe far more articulately than me said about 777 that it looks dead in the water, doesn't it? And the frustrating thing for fans is we've known all about this for a long time, haven't we? About 777, indeed, since they threw the hat in the ring in September. Why is it taking this long? And having added another £200 million worth of that to reach this juncture when I would imagine a lot of people could have forecast this. But late last year when he said there'd be a resolution in Q4, by the end of December, it hasn't happened. So what's new to Moshiri now than what was known to him 4 months ago?
Well, this is the point, Joe, isn't it? I mean, Moshiri's surely the only one making this decision, allowing this to happen. He's got to make a decision now, and has he got to come out and say something to the fans as well? Some sort of statements, that would, put fans at ease.
I don't really know what you could say that would put fans at ease. It's a very difficult and messy situation. I mean, look, if we break it down to how it's got into this stage, I think actually it's probably quite straightforward. 777 weren't the first people that came to the Moshiri agreed exclusivity with. You had the Kaminsky ones back in 2022 and then MSP last year as well. So they weren't his first choice. But it is true to say that since September they've been his only choice. Now, what's never really come to light is what the makeup of that deal was. So we don't know what Moshiri was offered. Look, he's put a hell of a lot of money into this club. That's indisputable. How he spent it has been the problem. You can understand that there may be a scenario in which this is particularly attractive to him or far more attractive than any of the alternatives. One thing that's certainly clear from a Moshiri point of view is that, and this is not good for the club, but perhaps better for Moshiri, is since September the club's been running on somebody else's money. So that's probably why it's been useful for him, despite the red flags, to kind of carry on going on with it, because it's not him dipping into his own pocket to pay for wages, to pay for the costs, to pay for the ongoing stadium development. For the Premier League, I can quite easily see how they were caught in a bit of a regulatory catch-22 by means of, and I'm not saying it's particularly good tactically from them, but they were probably left in a situation where the owners and directors test is more stringent. There's a lot of pressure on them to get things right. But there's also a significant amount of grey area, and you can see the problems that someone like 777 Partners might create for that process, because you're in a situation where you look at them, we don't know a huge amount about them. We have their track record of football clubs, but all the football clubs they've taken over, on the one hand you can say yes, and again we've reported this extensively throughout, late payments at some clubs for wages, transfer bans over payments. Jenner had a point taken off them over issues. A lot of these clubs have continued to face issues whilst they've been controlled by 777. But the 777 line, and there is some credence to this, is that they were already a mess when they took over, and that where it gets murky is they say some of these problems are the overhang of the previous issues. Well, it's very difficult to kind of get to the bottom of that without intricately knowing those clubs' finances, but it is a plausible move, and you can see how from the Premier League's perspective, you have that, and there are concerns, but are they big enough concerns to say no to the deal? Perhaps not. You look at perhaps some of the moral issues, how they made their money before they got into football, or what their business is at least based on. The idea of picking up the insurance and the compensation deals of vulnerable people that owed money in staggered payments over a long period of time, and they want upfront money quicker, so 777 or their affiliate companies give them money and basically buy the compensation packages off them cheaper. And morally you look at that, and you look at some of the questions that have been raised in court cases around the world, again are only allegations because they haven't been dealt with, and again you can see problems, but without them having necessarily been convicted of anything, without them necessarily to have been found in any breach of serious regulations, you're looking for a red line, an official red line to have been crossed probably before the Premier League can turn around and say it's a definite no. You look at some of the, I know that the owner and directors test has been beefed up, but when you look at ownership in the Premier League, there are murky and controversial and contentious owners there already. And you can probably see how it's not been ideal by any stretch of imagination. And what you would want is, a process whereby due diligence sees these problems and deals with them straight away. But you can almost imagine the Premier League sitting there thinking, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. Like, if we say yes, well, we've got serious issues over them. But if we say no, there's probably legal issues about that. They might get, that decision might get challenged by 777, by Everton, by others, and you look at those red lines and have any of them been crossed where they can go, no, wait, that's one step too many. And the reality is we're possibly still in that position. Those claims by Leadenhall, they're still claims, and as I say, they're civil, not criminal. They add to that wider picture, but probably the more concerning, tangible issues are what has happened with Bonza, what has happened with his PR company, what is happening with Standard Liège right now. I think that where the dial has probably been moved is, and I think it's fair to say, why didn't he necessarily think this was likely to happen anyway? But it's looking very unlikely that Moshiri would get anything or what he would want from this, part of which is to get out of Everton, something he's been trying to do for 2 years. And the reality is that if 777 don't have the money to pass those tests, which is really starting to look like they probably don't, well then at what point does he then kind of say, I've got to be proactive now in terms of what I do and where I go to? And that's probably where we're at. That's probably why it's taken so long to get to this stage. We've just been in a grey area, but who suffers? Club suffers, fans suffer. The instability has continued for so long. Obviously, we know that what they've achieved on the pitch is so remarkable because of that. It's now getting to a point where it's going to impact, a very, very big summer for Everton. Whether they've got any money or not is largely irrelevant. There's going to be huge turnover of players. And there's going to be the first opportunity for Kevin Farwell to properly rebuild this side, whether it's rebuild it with free transfers and cheap deals, or whether there's money to spend is by the by. There is an opportunity there, and an important one, because probably the most important thing for Everton is that they stay in the Premier League. They've done that this year, fair play, incredible achievement. They've got to make sure that they do it next year so that they go into that new stadium as a top flight club.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of points Joe saying there. I think I've said before, I've now on the pod, that I do think, while they got obviously the issue of the owners and directors tax tested with regard to the Premier League, we've obviously got this ongoing profit sustainability stuff going on, haven't we? And I do think I think one of the reasons why the Premier League's been quite lenient and all this and allowed it to play out without interjecting is they don't want to be seen to think blocking 777 like stiffing Everton twice in the same season. I think they've been conscious that there's a reputational thing there and of their relationship with Everton. I do think that's probably played into it. Regarding Moshiri, and I know you want to push this on, is like, you're right, Joe, isn't it? Like 777 are good because they've been funding the club, haven't they, all the years to the tune of £200 million. But that's only good for Moshiri if 777 get the gig. If they don't get the gig, then it backfires on Moshiri. He's now trying to sell the club that's got £200 million more of debt than what it did in September when 777 initially showed their interest. So it's also obviously high risk for 777. He's now got £200 million worth of unsecured debt. Yeah,
it made sense for him whilst it looked like 777 could get over the line.
Yeah, absolutely, but it's still high. But on both parties, it's a high risk relationship. It's high risk trade, isn't it? And I do think that's really places at risk Everton then, doesn't it really? So yeah, I think Moshiri's role in all this is obviously far more people more commented than they've commented on is interesting. I know what I was thinking about as well is talking about the owners and directors test. It's all. I think they have one 2016, I presume they did. And Moshiri would have come in. I've got the money and all this. Have a previous experience in football. Probably flies through. What the owners and directors test doesn't, you've no way of finding out is how your owner reacts in a crisis. Who what like Moshiri now, you can pass the test, but somewhere down the line, when it comes to
impossible test, isn't it?
A real a decision point, when the club's in crisis, how your owner reacts. And what we've seen here is one of the and you can have a test that it's an unknown, isn't it? He's just disappeared, hasn't he? Largely silent, absent landlord, but the owners and directors test can never decide on that, can they? Because you don't know until the time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can deduce, and obviously it's a troubling one for us, is you look at the people that he surrounds himself with historically, and how well they've managed to handle the crises that have been put upon them, because there have been them at
Yeah,
Everton.
yeah.
And I mean, when you look at, again, something that we've covered extensively, a lot of the problems now have been have been made, over a substantial amount of time, and obviously, there are issues on the, previous board in relation to that. You look at the influence of, perhaps certain agents and things like that have had on him as well. And, I think a big concern or a big question for us right now has got to be who is Moshiri turning to for advice, or because now we don't know really, because it's an interim board, and things have become so much quieter. Like where is he taking the advice from?
It is, but the owners and directors will never uncover this, will he? I mean, they might have some previous if you've been involved. I don't know, in other businesses maybe as evidence, but this is only you only find out really what your own is like at this type of juncture, isn't it? And, and let's face it, for most Evertonians, Moshiri's failed their owners and directors test, hasn't he? And that ultimately is the problem.
A long time ago, yeah. Probably when the summer transfer spend of 2017, maybe. But I do think that's an interesting thing. We're talking about 777, who we know about, who may fail, perhaps. But Moshiri, who would have passed or whatever, we'd only find out about him further down the line.
Some breaking news. Deitch has won Manager of the Month. There we go.
Right.
There we go. It's 12 o'clock now.
Fully well deserved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up against some tough competition as well, though, wasn't he, really?
Yeah, maybe we'll come to that later after. We'll go back onto the football thing. But Deitch just won Manager of the Month. There you go.
I feel we should have a breaking news.
Flashing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if it's in the budget for next season, we'll get it.
Good, yeah.
Just staying on the Premier League point, I know we talked about it for a little bit here, but did you watch the podcast yesterday with Matt Jones and David Powell?
Very good, yeah.
So our chief business football writer, Dave Powell, suggested that the Premier League put the criteria bar so high for 777 that they knew, roundabout that they probably wouldn't be able to match it, because even interested parties or owners or billionaires with all the money in the world would maybe even struggle to meet those criteria. I mean, we talked about that in the
£1 billion, isn't it? Whatever it is.
That's what I mean. So this is not a dig at the Premier League. Even Dave said he doesn't want to give them too much credit because of what's happened, but he actually did give them credit for the criteria that he set for 777 to take over, and quite clearly they can't meet those parameters.
Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying about the Premier League. Don't want to see themselves as having an ongoing profit and sustainability battle with Everton, and then an ongoing battle for ownership and decide on 777. They want to see 777 fail themselves. I'm thinking, it's not to do with us.
Yeah.
We've set the criteria. If they can't meet it, well, we've been fair and above board here, and I think that's a pretty sensible move. But at the same time, giving them an opportunity to find the funding. So I've not got a problem with that. To be fair,
the problem has been, though, was what Joe was saying. They can't technically say to 777 straight away, no, you can't take over, because the deal has been agreed, and all these, fraud claims are just allegations. Nothing's been proven as far as we know so far. So that's like you just said there. They're just kind of letting it play out and say, well, you've got to meet these.
That's a sensible way of doing it, isn't it? Really, I mean, there's some takeovers have taken forever, haven't they? How did the Newcastle one take? Over a year. 18
months, I think that one was, wasn't it? Joe, obviously, if 777 don't take over, which is looking increasingly likely. Again, just referring to the podcast yesterday with Dave and Matt, you can watch it on the Royal Blue YouTube channel and listen to it on Spotify and Apple Pods. He said that the only option right now would be that MSP do take a control and stake into the club. Do you agree with that? Or we know there might be another party interested, but they haven't made themselves known. We know MSP have got a bit of a history with Everton, with everything that's going on with loans. So, and he doesn't see that as a bad thing either, by the way. How do you see it?
Yeah, well, MSP aren't the only option.
Yeah.
Because obviously a 777 deal collapses and anyone could potentially step forward. MSP would, if they wanted to, for whatever reason, would probably have a head start because they already have the relationships there, and obviously they already have a foothold within the club with the money that they've lent it. So MSP would probably be favourites if they wanted to exercise, the rights that they do have, or if they wanted to step in and help Moshiri exit the club, and if they had a plan for it, whether they would look to do so or not, I don't think that they would. I don't think they necessarily want to. I don't think. Yeah. I think obviously there was a stage last year when it looked like they wanted to kind of buy their way into a portion of Everton, and would probably from that smaller stake start to increase it to a point where they eventually took control of the club. That deal fell through because reportedly because of rights and media funding. The group that Everton had the biggest set of loans to objected to it. We're dealing with a very different situation now. Whether or not MSP would still have the appetite to try and take over, I'm not sure. But it becomes more a case of, I think for MSP the question probably becomes now it's less how much do we gain by taking over and but more how much do we lose if we don't. They have a significant amount of money that's owed to them by the club. They have an interest in the club being stable and the club being sustainably run so it can pay back its debt and they can get their money back that they invested in. It's not inconceivable that they might conclude that the best way to do that is actually just to step in and take responsibility themselves, come in, shore things up, get the club on the right foot. And they do have the protection now that the club is going to be a Premier League football club next season, so that helps. There are ways in which if not advantageous, it might make sense for them to do that, and that's one of the things that we'll no doubt be hearing more of over the coming days and possibly weeks. I think that they would be one of the candidates to potentially step in, and like I say, if they wanted to, they have a head start on everyone else. There's another American group that have been making a few inquiries behind the scenes, but the extent of their interest is unclear. Whether or not there are others waiting in the wings, I'm sure that there would be some. If 777 deal was to collapse, if Everton were to, say, for instance, go into administration, which I imagine is something that we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a moment, but say that was to come to pass, as horrific as the human impact would be in terms of jobs lost and money owed, from a purely financial perspective, it would make it easier for more people to come in and have a look at Everton and see if they want to take over, because a substantial amount of the debt burden would be cleared. But that's certainly not me saying it'd be a good thing for the club or the best thing by any stretch of the imagination, more that it would be a trigger point for potentially further interest to materialise. I think that not the most important thing, but like I've written a few times, I think that, and it felt like this even before these kind of latest developments with 777, but it felt like if somebody serious was on the scene, that now would be a very good time to come clear and step forward, because I think that there'd be a groundswell of support behind them, which they could probably capitalise on. It's difficult for anybody to conceivably be a success taking over Everton without winning the fan base over first. And I think one of the things that 777 has done poorly is I think it hasn't engaged with the fan base. I think it made some advances at the very start and then sought to hide behind the regulatory process to say that we're not going to carry on liaising. Maybe they would have, not even maybe, I think they probably would have helped to build a lot more goodwill if they'd have engaged more consistently and provided more answers over what it is that they plan to do with Everton. Chances are, or the way things look now, they probably weren't willing to provide answers because they might not actually have had them. No. Or certainly not ones that Everton
clear,
fans...
hasn't it? Yeah.
And I think it's something that we've always been suspicious and cynical of, is perhaps they did have answers, but not ones that Everton fans wanted to hear. If the White Knight was to come in right now, they could exactly present themselves as that White Knight and probably, build themselves some goodwill among Everton supporters right now, which would help them in the long run as they then start to go through the regulatory process and potentially take over the club. But in answer to your question, 777 collapsing wouldn't mean that MSP wouldn't be the only ones that could come in, but they would probably be the ones most likely to, or certainly the ones that would have the best position from which to launch an appeal, to launch a bid to take over, if that's where they feel their interests lie.
Go on, you're going to say something?
No, I was going to say that Dave was interesting point, didn't he, said about the question about Rights and Media Fund and block the MSP shareholding last year, didn't they, over because of the Rights and Media Fund and loan. And the question was asked, would they block any MSP move this time? And Dave was of the opinion that possibly he wouldn't, because it helps secure that they get their loan repaid if MSP
probably one of the worst
take
decisions in this whole thing for them to block that.
So that was an interesting point. I think the MSP, I mean, ultimately what we're doing here, it's still short term, isn't it, really? Because it doesn't, if MSP take their shareholding as well, preserving their investment. And remember, here it is, MSP are a group of, was it 13 or 14 investors, separate investors, one of whom is Moshiri, isn't it, I believe. So there's a lot of decision, there's a lot of input there from the people behind them. So it'd be interesting to see how that would play out. But that doesn't solve the debt position, does it? The fact that we've got all this hanging over us, it just puts the club in a bit more of an even keel from the sort of governance of it. But it doesn't wipe away the issues that we've spoken about. And that would be interesting to see how that plays out. But I'm with Joe totally. If I was riding over the hill now, I'd make my presence felt at this moment in time. And you hear stories, don't you? But it's all a bit grey.
Well, you've seen fans, and rightly so, on Twitter, saying if owners are just waiting for the club to go into administration, you're just starting off on a shocking footing in the first place. You just couldn't trust, an owner who does that. That's not what we want, because effectively we're going to be deducted 9 points, which is time frame given, whether that's in the next couple of weeks, months, that's going to probably play into next season. It's not what we want, administration, is it? So that's why I think. Well,
yeah, I mean it's far more than the football cost as well. That's been the problem with administration.
Yeah, no, obviously, but I think I've got a lot of anxiety, trepidation, and fear, all those type of words about what's going on. But watching, when I was producing the podcast yesterday with Dave, he was really good, and I felt a little bit of calmness from inside him. And I know he doesn't know exactly what's going on, but I felt he was good. He felt MSP was probably the best option right now. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, do you guys agree with that? Because his suggestion was that they would come in, run it like a business. Obviously, there would be cost-cutting measures in that, which mean player sales. We know that's going to happen anyway, but then they would look to, within 18 months, 2 years' time, look for an exit strategy. Yeah. But that, in a way, that surely would benefit Everton anyway, because they would have done the job and run the club properly, and hopefully we'd still be in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to say whether that'd be the best one, because we don't know what any alternatives might be.
But why not make yourself known?
But if you, I think if you were to offer the three of us around the table right now a scenario where MSP just took over and 18 months and tried to get the club onto a firm financial footing, I think right now we'd take that, wouldn't we? We'd take an announcement that's said, MSP coming forward in the morning and
there's no more loans.
Someone saying, yeah, we've agreed a new deal, 777 are gone. MSP are gonna. I think that we would. I think given all the different scenarios that could play out, I think we probably. I don't know if I'm speaking on your behalf.
No,
we would do. I think what you got to probably remember with MSP is that they're money people. They have interest in sport, but their expertise is in money, and everything that they do is from a position of wanting to benefit themselves financially in their own interests. Now, in this case, you would think that their interests align quite closely to Everton Football Club's interests and the supporters of Everton Football Club, and that the sounder footing that Everton is on financially, the better protected their investment is, the more likely they are to get their money back, and simultaneously, the more appealing it becomes to future owners, and the stronger the club becomes from a footballing perspective.
Yeah, you put it better than what I could have said, and I just think all football owners effectively, other than sugar daddies, are money people. They're not looking to lose money effectively. So if it was to benefit Everton, if MSP come in, I just think if there's people out there now, they need to make themselves known now, because effectively, if this deal doesn't go through, which it's looking unlikely it is, there's a real chance that the club could go into administration unless Moshiri, does something. think?
Yeah, we'll come on to administration in a bit, but yeah, I think it would be helpful if we know there are other people that are interested. It would be helpful if they were to come
But my
forward.
point is the MSP thing is, say the stadium needs 50 to 100 million to be completed. MSP comes in. Where does that come from? You know that list of, you were talking about on Wednesday, you read out the list of all the different financial burdens that we've got at the moment. MSP coming in doesn't really change. Okay, you could say that their debt may disappear temporarily. A lot of that stuff is still there, isn't it, really? And as you said, Dean, quite rightly, from a business decision as a club, those business decisions still need to be made, isn't it? About whether, who to buy, who to sell. We've got, dare I say, profit and sustainability still rearing its ugly head in the background.
Big in the background as well, because we've got that stadium interest.
Absolutely.
Argument that's going to happen at some point in the coming months, and that is going to have a huge impact.
So they'd be taking on all that burden, wouldn't they?
How much do they owe us? Sorry. How much do we owe them?
140, 150 million.
So
it
all just depends on how much they really want to recoup that money, which I'm sure they do.
Sure. If they've got 12 or 13 people who've invested,
that's what I mean.
Then there's a lot of people there who've backed them, isn't there, really? So I don't know, but it doesn't change. Yeah, I think that wouldn't be not the worst result, but it doesn't change all these business decisions and financial issues in the background, does it?
It does not. Joe, we've been speaking for 38 minutes now, and to be fair, my next topic was I was going to let either Gav vent or I was going to talk about Sheamus Coleman, but did you want to speak about administration a little bit?
Yeah, we've used the words a few times. We've seen it pop up a few times today, haven't we? I think some of the national media report, I can completely understand the concern. Look, Everton isn't in a strong position financially at all. I think we can all see that. I think that it's probably worth bearing in mind in relation to that we got a tranche of money from 777 at the beginning of the month. How far that takes us into it, I'm not entirely sure, but and what happens if 777 deal falls through? Well, then it will fall onto Farhad Moshiri to start digging into his own pockets, and the extent to which he could do that and his willingness to do that remains unclear. But what we are doing now is, I think we're in a position where I might be wrong, but I don't see that as an imminent threat.
No.
I think that we have to remember that we're getting very close to the summer now. Everton are guaranteed to stay in the Premier League. Transfer window opens on June the 14th. So if the club needed to, and it may well need to for a host of reasons, profit and sustainability included, but obviously, in roughly a month's time, a summer window for several months opens, which gives the club an opportunity to bring in significant external funds for a considerable period of time, and that helps. And then you also end up in a situation where things like the TV money starts to come in, the merit payments for where they finish in the Premier League,
it's sponsors money and all that type of stuff, isn't it?
The club will have just received, will have a significant tranche of season ticket holder money for the people that have paid up for next year. So obviously, whilst Everton face a very uncertain long-term future financially, and even short-term, I think that in terms of administration, it's probably still something that we should be cautious about.
Way off.
I didn't say way off.
Okay.
But what I did say is it's not not something that's imminent. I don't think. Just for clarity as well, if Everton, I mention this simply because I've been asked it. This isn't trying to get something in that I can then point back on. But if the club goes into administration and Premier League gets -9 points, the deadline for this season compared to next season is the final day of the season. So if Everton were to say, for instance, you see some people talking about things like a tactical administration, which I think is, again, the human cost of administration would be so catastrophic, not just for the club, but for the city. The jobs that would be lost, the suppliers, the creditors that would get, that would probably lose out on the money that they're owed. I think it's still a subject that deserves some caution when discussed. But yeah, if Everton were to enter it, before the final day of the season, the 9 points would come into effect this season. And if it was after the last day of the season, at any point from that, it would be for next season, for the -9. But yeah, as I say, it's clearly a topic that's out there for discussion, and I don't think that's I think when you look at where Everton are financially, that's understandable that some people would look towards that. But I certainly don't think it's a good thing. Even if there is a chance it would bring other investors and other potential parties to look at Everton. And I think that human element is something that we need to be very aware of. And like I say, the signs that we can see suggest that it's not something that's certainly not imminent anyway.
I mean, I'll ask you, Gav, and I'll probably know what the answer is, just the fact that Joe's explained it really well there and the deadline and stuff like that. Would you stick or twist?
In what way?
Well, but you said the deadline's before the end of the season for the administration.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
look at administration.
No, just asking the question.
There's stuff like, they always say the classic signs is people don't get paid on time, you have problems over the end of revenue and stuff, and we're not at that stage yet. As Joe said, though, you can't, when you say, you keep on going back to what I said about going concerned in the accounts, didn't it, in the annual report, that it needs, it's a club to carry on trading, it needs new investment. And so, ergo, if we don't get new investment, what Joe's saying is right, isn't it? Administration becomes a possibility, absolutely. But I don't think we're at that stage, And from what you hear, don't you hear that we're all right at the end of the season? As you say, there is then opportunities, short-term decisions to be made around player sales in June. That would then, we may need to happen anyway. And then I think I'm with Joe on this one, really. Not at this stage, but with a big but.
Yeah, it's not a case of stick or twist or anything like that. No. It's a try and avoid it in all circumstances.
No, yeah, of course, absolutely. I'm just asking the questions. I mean, Steve Murphy, little comment here. He's sworn that, so I'm going to have to change it. Talking crap, lads. We will never go into administration. That would be the end. I won't support administration in the club. I don't think anyone on this podcast is advocating for administration. I'm just asking the questions.
And also, I mean, I'm hoping he's I hope he's not misinterpreting what we're saying here. We're trying to offer reassurance here, not saying it's.
Which is why I've read his comments.
Which I said the same thing on Wednesday. On Wednesday's pod is I don't think that it's not immediately on the table at the moment. And there's other things with administration. It makes it difficult to borrow money, doesn't it? Afterwards, when you start trading again, things like that.
No credit flow.
So it's not.
And the other thing to add in is obviously, whilst there's that capacity to potentially sell players to bring money in from June the 14th, which might help pay the bills and things like that. It's also difficult to read too much into that if Everton do sell a big player or players very early in the transfer window, because they may need to do that for profit and sustainability reasons as well. Yeah. So I mean, the complications are myriad. Like, there's no disputing that the club is in a mess financially, but like Gav says there's a few stages, HMRC, staff,
players,
things like that, stuff, which we haven't even started at that point yet. So those are the early warning signs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate that, again, if you watch the podcast yesterday, Dave Powell said the exact same thing, which I think it put me at ease more than anything, because I have, major fear about it. We're going to move on, but there is a couple of questions relating to this. So I'm going to let Gav vent, because I know he's desperate to vent.
Absolutely.
So just jump in if you want to answer, but do you think 777 will be told no deal before the weekend, or is it going to drag on until the end of the season? What are we saying?
I imagine that something like this is probably quite complicated, so Moshiri will have to, if he's proactively seeking to end it, which I think at this stage it would probably have to be the case, then there potentially be penalties that he would have to deal with for withdrawing from that deal. I don't think things move quickly in this world, albeit the warning signs have been there for a long time. You would hope that contingency planning would be in place. I think it probably rumbles on. It'd be nice to get some clarity. God, how nice would it be to have some certainty? But how imminent that'll be, I think that right now, I kind of said at the beginning of this pod, I think there's probably a lot of people sitting in rooms around tables, running lots of calculations through their heads and gaming the scenarios, and probably still at this present moment in time working out what's best for them. So I'd be I'd be a little bit surprised, but obviously, you never know, do you?
It's just gone back to the word resolution, doesn't it? On in what Alan reported, wasn't it? And those words were fed to him. Obviously, on Wednesday is what do you mean by resolution? The only thing I'd say is it wise to announce anything 24 hours before the last home game of the season?
That's it. Farhad Moshiri might reach a resolution in his head as to what he's going to do. They've got to put it into practice, hasn't it?
I'd probably, if I was in his shoes, I'd probably just leave it to next week. Do you think Josh Wander will be there, baseball cap in hand?
I mean, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot on his plate.
On Saturday. It might be too warm for a baseball cap, but that's what struck me about Friday. If it's bad news, or you might get stick over. Why do it after the last home game of the season, mate?
Okay, last question before we move on to a different subject. Two Wheel Lucas says, do the Premier League deserve a round of applause for dragging their heels, saving the club from a poor Moshiri sale decision?
I think that the thing to remember with the Premier League, like with so many others, is that probably everything they do is with their own interests in mind. What they've been tasked with trying to do this season with the outside scrutiny that's come with trying to stave off independent regulation is make it look as if they're acting within the interests of wider football. In reality, it's not. It just happens to be that sometimes their interests align with the wider, with the strength of the wider game. I think that, obviously the conditions that they placed on this bid, and the fact that they haven't approved it, is a good sign, because everything that points to, everything points to the 777 wouldn't necessarily be the best suitable owners for Everton. I think a learning curve a lesson for the Premier League after all this is probably to work out how they can get to a situation whereby they can almost strengthen this process, really, because it hasn't helped Everton financially to be in a situation where it's dragged on for so long and the debts have risen up and things like that. It's got to be a kind of a question of when do you step in and what is best, because it's not best for the sustainability of Everton nor for the Premier League to almost set an impossible task and then let somebody fail however long it takes. Really, they need to be bolder and more proactive in saying no if they see those warning signs. But it's a very, very one thing I think is fair to say is it's very, very complex. I wouldn't be able to draw up an alternative set of proposals, I don't think. And I think I think it may well be that it almost feels like 777 the Premier League have been in a situation where they haven't really been able to make a decision either way, and have been hoping that the process, the bid will fail of its own accord, which is what it has done.
Yeah.
They probably could have done with that being the case a couple of months earlier. It'd be handy, I think, if they could put a backstop on these things rather than saying they take an indefinite amount of time.
Yeah.
If they could say, well, if you haven't met conditions within 6 months or so, then we'll say no, you're not suitable. And then you can maybe come forward again, but you've got to go through the whole process again or something like that.
Yeah, spot on.
Maybe, I don't know. I think probably, however it's transpired, I think we're all probably better off at this present moment in time, or happier that the fact that the deal didn't go through at Christmas like certain people hoped it would do.
Yeah, okay.
Should we talk a bit of football?
Oh, it'd be nice.
Yeah.
Go on, Gav.
I made sure this was on one.
You made sure you wanted this on the agenda. It's on the agenda. Jared Brandwaite.
Yeah.
Go.
The announcement yesterday of the young player and the young player, and I suppose you would call the senior player of the year yesterday, and I was looking through the list of the young players and the older players, and there was a couple of things struck me. And the first thing is the virtual, apart from Ollie Watkins, in the usual suspects of clubs, which whether the Premier League should show greater quality in terms of the choice of players. I know the year before, I think Casado was up for Young Player of the Year. It just reinforces that view that the Premier League exists, and it's important for their brand to have like the top players all the time, as without being more imaginative and being fair to take account that other players maybe not have the same opportunities. That was the first take I got from it. The second take I got from it was this ridiculous rule. I think you have to be 23 at the start of the season, but you get the ridiculous rule that Isaac at Newcastle in September is closer to 30 than 20, and he's been nominated for young player of the year because he's 25 in September, which is just a ridiculous position, isn't it? Young player of the year is, well, you would say 22. I mean, it did used to be young player of the year like 22, 23. And now you raising it up to, I think, Foden's 24. Is you basically got senior players who've been there donkey's years in the young player of the year. I mean, that's just, Mainoo's has had a decent season at United. He's only played for 4 months or 5 months. And he hasn't been, pulling up any trees in the last 5 or 6 weeks when I've seen. And that it's just that, and that perception. And I don't necessarily suppose it all the time. And this goes back to what you were saying, Joe. The Premier League does what's best for the Premier League. And what's best for the Premier League as a brand is to put the marquee players, is to squeeze them into any award ceremony, even though some of them don't obviously, whether they should be there or deserve to be there, or that's both them things are the case. And the young player of the year is list is ludicrous on that basis of age and where the players are in their careers and just the general rules. And the startling omission from the young player of the year is Jared Brandtwaite for me, who's 22, who's had a tremendous season. There's another centre half at another Merseyside club who's in the player of the year, who I would say actually has probably had a poorer season than Brandtwaite week in, week out, and there's probably a supporter of that club who may say the same. And he should be there. That's what the award's there for. It's not to reward players who've been playing for their senior clubs for 5 or 6 years. It's for players like Brandtwaite who've come in, who's been new to the Premier League and has flourished. And that was always the award always went to players like that years ago. Players who to coin one of Michael Richards' phrases, burst onto the scene. That's what it's there for. It's not there to give Haaland an award because he's not a young player, is he? He's been a senior player for 4 or 5 years. He's at the biggest club in the country, or Foden. But on Brandtwaite, who that award should be for, that's and I know Mainoo's in there, so I don't think he deserves to be there, but at least he's in there for the right reasons. But some of the other players on it, Isaac, 25 in September, a young player, come on, and Brandtwaite should be on there all day long. In fact, there's an argument to say that Brandtwaite's been one of the players of the year, never mind young players of the year. And it just reinforces that thing about the bias and the Premier League using this stuff to promote their brand at the exclusion of clubs outside the top 6 or 7. And I think that's wrong. I think it's only Ollie Watkins, isn't it, outside the top 6 or 7 who's in there. And Ollie Watkins definitely deserves to be there. But there's people on both lists who shouldn't be there. And they're only there because the Premier League wants to push their brand, and I think that's wrong. And I think that's unfair on the other clubs who provide the Premier League with content, and good content most weekends. And so that's my rant over.
I assume you're not going to disagree.
Yeah, just the breaking news I kind of was anticipating during this has just come out, as Everton have withdrawn their appeal against the 2-point deduction.
Wow.
So they've just put a statement out there. So
let me make a timestamp of that on the pod.
Any appeal up against Brandtwaite not getting
we'll go on to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think it's a shocking admission. I think he's been brilliant. And some of the players that there instead of him, we have serious question marks, and I think you can make similar arguments in relation to manager of the season as well. I mean, I think Sean Dyche isn't there, and I think he deserves to be quite frank. I think that, it's funny, look, I can see an argument whereby he wouldn't necessarily win it, because obviously you also have the longest winless run in his club's Premier League history. But I think when you look at the job that he's done, this is a club that 2 seasons in a row have gone to the final week of the season with its Premier League status in jeopardy, and then to take a weaker squad than those 2 years, get it to safety weeks in advance of the end of the season with 8 points worth of deductions is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that, albeit he's just won April's manager of the month.
Yeah.
I think we see that because there's just no choice. The Premier League knows it has no choice, bearing in mind the month he's just had, than to do it. But when you look at that wider perspective there, and probably, let's be honest, the reason that he's not up there for manager of the month is because, for manager of the season, is because you can only tell the story of that application or that bid or that challenge against the backdrop of everything the Premier League have thrown at Everton.
I was about to say that.
You can't say, you can't say he deserves to be up there for manager of the season without saying because he's dealt with 8 points of deductions from unpressidented Premier League profit and sustainability.
I was just about to jump in with that when you said that. Absolutely.
So I can very much imagine that the conversation at Premier League Towers being, how do we tell this story? And then going, you know what, let's not do it. And I think that's at the detriment of the integrity of the Premier League once again, because look at what he's done.
I don't agree with the thing about corruption. You don't know what you're doing, which, let's face it, probably, opposites, aren't they? To be corrupt, you've got to know what you're doing to a degree. But you can see why fans, when you see like that young player of the year and senior player of the year stuff, when you see like the bias towards the big clubs, players who shouldn't be there, you can see why fans then, when we talk about the profit and sustainability and how clubs are treated within that, then take the next jump and say, well, actually, there's a pattern emerging here. So I can see why people think that. But the young player of the year, it's I could do another 15 minutes, but I'm too tired.
We'll do
far more
part.
important things to talk about.
Well, I do want to speak about Coleman and Sheffield United, but just on Joe's breaking news there, Everton have withdrawn the appeal. I do think we need to touch on that because we're getting questions in about it now. It's obviously going to be all over Twitter. We brought this point up, didn't we, a couple of weeks back? And as far as I can remember, you two were against. I know Joe definitely was. So, first of all, just reaction to it and what's the thinking behind it?
Yeah, probably not surprised. And I can see a thought process for it. I think it's strengthened by two things in comparison to when we last spoke about. One is the fact that Everton are safe, and two is that we've had the Forest appeal that came back and they found they didn't get any rewards. So I think both of those have probably helped to change perspective. I think my position previously, and so as I now, is that if you withdraw it, you kind of appear as if you give up on some of your points, and it's trying to work out where that leaves everybody going forward, because Everton, I think, are going to have further PSR conversations with the Premier League. So it's probably a case of trying to work out whether or not you can settle any arguments in advance of that and strengthen your position of understanding. There's probably an argument to say, and maybe the tables have turned following that Forest case and following the success of Everton in recent weeks and the points that they've picked up with, that actually it's more beneficial for the club to try and curry some good favour with the Premier League. These conversations are going to carry on happening. Everton have a hearing with the Premier League. I don't know that a date's been set. I'm assuming it'll be over the summer, but it might not be.
Is that for the interest? We're talking about the interest,
which is over the interest on.
Okay.
What the club says were loans that were used for the stadium. There's about £20 million worth that's going to be argued over. If Everton lose that battle, that's an extra £20 million that they're going to have to find ahead of June the 30th for the PSR deadline to try and not breach for a third time. So if Everton can curry any kind of good favour in relation to that, any kind of goodwill, we've seen that exceptional cooperation has helped in the past in the case of Forest. We've also seen how what Forest were able to do that Everton couldn't do was they were to a certain extent able to learn from Everton's mistakes over the first case because they had a precedent to follow. It's very clear that they saw how Everton fought their position, and Forest looked at that and get, right, you know what, if we just cooperate on every single level, maybe we'll be able to draw a contrast to Everton and get some benefit from it, and they were able to because their points deduction was reduced for that cooperation. Interestingly, what they've done since then is they couldn't have been any more critical of the Premier League, the process. They appealed the process. They said it was ridiculous. Then they've come out and had a go at referees and everything. They couldn't have behaved any more different to how they initially behaved. And obviously, they haven't got any points back, and they haven't earned themselves any goodwill, I don't think, in the process. Everton can perhaps look from that now and go, you know what, maybe if we just try and be a little bit savvy, we can maybe help ourselves going forward. You never know, like it might come in favour because, like I say, Everton are going to be Everton are in a position where I think from the outside looking in, Gav, I think it's fair to say it's going to be a challenge to not breach PSR again for a third season. That's not saying it's going to happen. There are differences this season compared to last season, such as
no management payoff, no payment to board of directors,
and things like that. Increase in merit payments because they should finish higher in the league and things like that as well. But it still looks like it'd be a challenge that might only be able to be resolved with the sale of a player before June the 30th. So I think the conversations and discussions between the Premier League and Everton over profit and sustainability are only going to continue, and they're only going to be a feature of the near future. And I think there's a history of showing that if you try and almost take the moral high ground or be the better man or try and show a willingness to concede some of your position, then that has a benefit in the long term, and therefore I can understand why it's been withdrawn.
It's interesting. The last time you were at the appeal, the Premier League didn't put any aggravating factors, did they? I think.
No.
I think also as well, going back to what we were saying before, as I always say, on our agenda and our board meetings, there's there's a lot of bandwidth that being filled, and from a corporate perspective, they just probably think it's not worth it. It's another thing. We don't another headache.
Yeah.
I think
we don't need.
That was my point at the time.
We're not going to get anything for it, and I think I think that needs to be borne in mind really. In all this, when there's probably, I don't want to use the word battle, there's bigger conversations, as Joe said, around PSR to be had over the next 3 or 4 months.
Have we got time to talk about Coleman, Sheffield United?
Yeah, briefly.
Very quickly. I mean, when I say Sheffield United, I'm just going to ask you predictions. Coleman then, Joe. Is reports suggesting that Everton have offered him a new deal?
Well, it looks like like we've always said, I think it will be Coleman's decision when and how he leaves Everton. I think that looks like it's going to remain the case. Whether or not he chooses to extend his stay, I think the opportunity will be there for him. If he wants to, he was very open. It was a very difficult decision for him last season. This season, from a playing perspective, hasn't got any easier for him. Obviously, he had a lot of injuries. And I think probably what will concern him won't necessarily be the big injuries, but it'll be how, and this has happened so often this season, when he has come back for a game, he's had to miss a couple following it, and that's happened 2 or 3 times, I think. But obviously he's a player that of huge value to Everton dressing room, and I think that during a time in which there could be a lot of upheaval, and ahead of a season which I think will be another challenge on and off the pitch, I think he's the type of personality that you definitely want there. It would have been nice if this was all resolved ahead of Sheffield United, just so we had some clarity as to whether or not that it'd be his last game. Because the last thing we'd want to do is for him to have something like a Jagielka where it doesn't, that's not clear. He doesn't get the send-off that he deserves. And I think we all agree that he would deserve an exceptional send-off. But obviously Deitch seemed to be trying to heavily hint yesterday that it might not be his last game. I think a decision's yet to be made by him, but I think it will be his. So I think there's a value in him staying. I can also understand why, from his perspective, he might want to go. Enough is enough. So
I mean, so much you can take.
I just hope we get to. I just hope at some point, whenever it is, and it could be, next season or the season after, or you could go on the coaching staff, and it could be years to come. I just hope at some point we genuinely get to celebrate Coleman and the role and the impact he's had at the club.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, Gav, because you've seen when certain Everton players retired, and then maybe a couple of years later they've come out and said I didn't leave Everton the way I wanted to, or I wasn't treated the greatest. I think Phil Jagielka's actually come out and said that. I think maybe Leon Osman as well.
Tony Ibbott I know that there was a few that went. I think they were in the backdrop of Martinez going. It was all like the flux, but so
obviously Coleman looks like he's going to be here for another year.
I've not got a problem with that. I mean, I would imagine the wages aren't going to hurt us, are they? I mean, we've got and I think the one thing that will be interesting to see is Ireland. Future about whether, because I mean there was one game, didn't you play 290 minutes for Ireland
within 5 days or something?
National break,
is whether as part of the deal there is a conversation about
it should be
playing for Ireland. As you saw with Decore, he got two things that weren't necessarily not linked. Was the Decore announcing the year extension to his contract, then saying I'm not going the Cup of Nations. And
then he got injured for a month anyway.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? It's another factor to play in, really. But I've got an issue. You get the impression that the club at the moment needs Coleman, doesn't it?
I think so.
I think so. On and off the pitch,
for
somebody
a lot
that
of
the club
reasons,
can, somebody that supporters can identify with. He is obviously a throwback to, I mean, it might be 16 seasons next year he's played for us if he makes an appearance. He's a throwback to the, mid years of David Moyes, as much as he played in 2009. Moyes was still there 4 years later. So, it symbolises a lot for the club, and I think we need him possibly more than what he needs us at this moment in time.
But one thing, and I don't think Coleman would have any dispute with this either, is that if he does stay on, I think, the club, I think, is stronger. If he does stay on, the right-back situation from a long-term perspective still needs addressing this summer.
Debut against Benfica at the Stadium Light when we got trounced. I think he played left back. I was there. What a shocking night that was.
Fantastic.
I was. We left, I think, on the 5th. I was like, I've had enough of this. I got stranded on a motorway.
Oh, wow.
I mean, to be fair, we had a very, very weakened team out that night.
We did,
against a very good team. I think Di Maria was playing for him, wasn't he?
I just had the expectations of an away game abroad to maybe snatch a win.
That's a pretty cool thing to say.
Shows how much I know.
At the end.
I know, okay, predictions then. We're not going to obviously go into detail about this, but we've got 253 people, and you've gone into both extremely, really good detail on everything that we've spoke about. Predictions. Ian Clark says 3-0 to Everton, Dominic Calvert-Lewin 2 goals. Joe,
Nice.
What are you saying for tomorrow?
I think Everton will win. I think Everton will win comfortably. I like that prediction. I'm going to steal his.
Okay.
I'd like to see some younger players, and again, Dyche wasn't particularly
It's not a style.
emphatic about the opportunity that might that might fall to most players. But Everton are safe. They're playing against already relegated team, which are far below the standards of the Premier League. I think that this is a good opportunity, if possible, to use the likes of maybe give someone like Lewis Dobbin a start, maybe try Chimity up front again, maybe those are 2 players I think you could genuinely learn something about for next season, and I think that opportunities to learn lessons in a pressure-free environment have been they've been non-existent for Everton over recent years, and I think especially against an opposition which is useful for it. So I would like that to be the case. I mean, even Beto, if Beto was to start, he still hasn't had that many starts for Everton, so I think it would be good. He started against Sheffield United in the other game, of course, up at their place, just after his arrival a few days earlier. So, I would like to just see a little bit of rotation. Not rotation for the sake of it, but rotation for the sake of trying to learn something. Lewis Dobbin is a player that it makes sense to have a look at to see whether or not, we think he can grow into a player that can do a more consistent job for the first team next season. And then, there have been a few players that have been in and around the squad a few times this season, like Sir Jensen Metcalfe, Mackenzie Hunt, Lewis Warrington in recent weeks. I'm not advocating necessarily starting them, but I don't see a drawback. I don't see any disadvantage to giving them some minutes on the pitch, and especially Mackenzie Hunt's one of them, obviously at left back. Now, what his future is, I don't know. But Everton's fullback situation going into the summer is you have Nathan Patterson with a long-term injury. You have Vitaly Mikalenko with a long-term injury. You have Sheamus Coleman and Ashley Young, who are both up for their contracts are up, and even if they stay, are both north of 35.
Yeah.
And then your 5th option is Ben Godfrey, who is just a centre back. He's not a viable long-term full-back option, and is somebody that might be looking at his options next season over this summer as he looks to try and build his career again. So, if you have got a full-back in the under 20 in the under 21s that's on the bench, why not at least give them a few minutes just to see if they could maybe be, even if it's 2nd or 3rd choice next season. Just have a little look.
I'm going to get my prediction in before you, Gav. Sorry, 2-0. McNeil Thunderbolt and a Calvert-Lewin goal. So what do you say?
Streak player, as we said on this pod, and he's proved us right, hasn't he? Is it 4 goals and 5?
Yeah.
I'm going to go for 2-0. A couple of things. First name on the team sheet for me tomorrow, Chimity.
Okay.
I think I'd play in both games.
Ahead of Calvert-Lewin or partnership?
maybe just behind Calvert-Lewin. I think I'd like to see him in 2 games because I've liked what I've seen so far. And this game, Sheffield United, last home game of the season, of a certain age, me, brings back nightmares of 49 years ago when we played
they stuck with
Sheffield United.
The memories are coming out
game
here.
of the season, and we were going for the title. We still had a chance, slightly, long odds to the title, and we win 2-0 half time. I think Derby were top. They were getting beat 1-0, and I thought, like, that's it. Title, blah blah blah. Everton in the 70s summed up. Ended up getting beat 3-2. Summed up how, if it was one afternoon that summed up being Evertonian in the 70s, that was probably it. I don't think it will happen tomorrow, and I'm not talking about Everton challenging for the title. I'm talking about the results. I think it'd be good to go off on a high, and I think lap of honour, maybe the players deserve that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, I feel like tomorrow is the official countdown to leaving Goodison tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. That makes sense. Yeah, no, I do. Yeah.
Good one.
Last home game of the season. So yeah, I think that's all, isn't it? Don't think we've got anything else to say.
Exhausted.
We've been going for 1 hour 12 minutes.
2 rounds of breaking news, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well
This should be like a rolling news pod. You get different people coming in, and you can
give us a bit. I've got to produce other podcasts here, Gav. Do you know what I mean?
You get it done. This is the main one.
It is. It most certainly is. Okay, well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please remember to hit the like and subscribe button for the Royal Blue YouTube channel. As always, give us a review. 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Pods. We don't accept 3. Anything below 3, we don't accept it. So 4 or 5, that'll do. I've been Ian Croll with Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.